Hey, everybody. Morning, friends. Good to see you all. It's been a while. Let's see. What's happened since I've seen you last? So let's see who's here. Good morning. Let's see. We're going to start with me uploading. It's kind of something that I have, if you get away for 5 minutes, you stop uploading, uploading. Back in the world of source sheets and all that kind of stuff, which is awesome. Let me get, I see Jay's question, can I get the source sheet for sure? I can find my way over to where I keep it. All right. It's here somewhere. Jay, let me know if that came through, okay? How's the sound, everybody? Can you hear me? Awesome. So I think just the first thing to do probably when we just if maybe everybody should unmute all at once and we should just all just cacophonously talk to one another. And that would be a way of totally deconstructing all the etiquette that Zoom is kind of ingrained in all of us and ensconced in our listening modes. We could just do an echamia. Yeah, exactly. Just Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Just do some cacophonous Shabbat Shalom.
Big Shabbos from Florida.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Dak ve'amatz.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
All right.
Reb David.
Yeah, Aunt Joni.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm so thrilled to be here. It's the first Shabbat in 2 months that I haven't had to work. So I'm just beyond thrilled. And I want to give you a Gesundheit welcome back. And boy, oh boy, were you missed. And that's all your Aunt Joni has to say.
Okay, Aunt Joni. First of all, I already know that statement is not true, but I just want to say that's all you have to say right now. You have to add that.
Okay, it's not necessary to tell everyone that I have a bigger mouth than some people might know. But now that you've done that.
God forbid. Oh, I'm sorry, Joni. I meant to say that you always have more and more.
I always have something to say, yes.
Wonderful things to say, which God forbid, I love it when you speak. I meant to say that you have a lot of gifts to offer us in terms of your love and your affection and your mirroring. So I'm sorry you heard it the other way. I meant it in the positive way. So it's good to hear your voice too. And I'm happy to be back to receive that. And I also had a chance when I was away to take in some of the remarkable teachers that this community has, Diane, Rabbi Coloresis, and also Rabbi Rivera, and all of the talented morning minyan lay leadership that was going strong throughout this week when Rabbi Rivera was away. I was able to check in and see a couple of times to hear you singing so beautifully and mellifluously, Margot, and Chizkiva Imtzi, and all of the people in that community as well. It's really been a machaya, it's a machaya. So we'll learn a little Torah together. I want to start off by thanking Ari for holding the space behind the scenes and checking in and making sure that all of us can hear each other and share Torah across this amazing medium that we're using. Houston. So I'm going to share the screen and just a reminder that because of the nature of like when it's the same person is doing the teaching for the open book and also leading services, it's I'll have to leave about 9:50, so we'll have to stop our study together. But I heard from Arya this morning that a custom has arisen that there's like a little a great opportunity for people to share with one another after the open book is open. So we're going to start calling it Open Book, Open Hearts. And so that's I just thought of that. So we'll just do that, and then we get a chance to connect with one another. Can you see the text, everybody? Cool. So maybe would somebody let's invite Margot? Would you lead us in this morning's Birchat Torah?
It'd be my honor. Baruch atah Yah, blessed are you, source of all. Eloheinu ruach haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav. You make us holy with your mitzvot. V'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, and command us to immerse ourselves in the words of Torah.
Amen. You know, just as you said it, it's so beautiful the way that you inflected that bracha. You said the mitzvot, you said it with your mitzvot. And of course, in the Hasidic world, when you say your mitzvot, you don't mean your commandment. You say that the mitzvot that you keep, God, right? Your mitzvot, the mitzvotav, God's mitzvot. So when we're learning Torah together, you have to imagine that this is the way that God fulfills the mitzvah of limud Torah, of learning Torah, the obligation to learn Torah. So since I'm kind of getting back onto the teaching and studying horse after spending time on fishing boats with my kids, I'm gonna go to we should all go to the place where we're comfortable and where we know, like, you know, where our hearts soar when it comes to Torah. The Talmud teaches us that the makom in adam lamed ela ma shelibo chafetz, that the person doesn't learn things other than the things that make the heart leap, you know, what your heart yearns to hear. And so I love to learn Chassidut, so we're going to learn a little bit of Chassidut today in a couple of pieces from Chassidut. And as usual, I unfortunately I didn't have a chance to be inside with Rabbi Dia to see, you know, what the minhag hamakom has become, what the custom of the space has become in terms of open mic versus, like, you know, more frontal learning. But we're going to learn a couple of pieces of Torah from the Chassidut. And then we'll open it up for where it lands for you, a little bit like the style that I have in the Hasidic Masters class. Yeah, is that cool, everybody? We're going to learn some Torah together. Okay. In this week's Torah portion begins with these verses. Maybe I can get a reader. I'm going to call on. I love Asher Chaim. Can you read the Hebrew of these three psukim?
ראה, אנוכי נותן לפניכם היום ברכה וכללה. את הברכה אשר תשמעו אל מצוות אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום, והקללה אם לא תשמעו אל מצוות אדוני אלוהיכם, וסרתם מן הדרך אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום, ללכת אחרי אלוהים אחרים אשר לא ידעתם.
Wonderful. Let's see, someone to read in the English and to inflect. We like inflection. Maybe Beth. Is it okay if I call on you?
Yes. See, this day I set before you blessing and curse. Blessing if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I enjoin upon you this day. And curse if you do not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn away from the path that I enjoin upon you this day and follow other gods whom you have not experienced.
Beautiful. So Re'eh, right? The Torah begins this week's portion with this. First of all, the singular grammatical form of look, Re'eh, not Re'u, which is the plural. But each and every one of you has to behold and see, right? Vision. So Moshe is about to, it's clearly it's a literary device. Look, right? Like behold, let it be clear. But of course, the invitation, of course, for generations is to look at Re'eh as a function of tshuva, because this portion is always read right as we begin our journey towards Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And so vision and perception more broadly is a very deep part of our question, right? When we engage ourselves with tshuva, which is, am I seeing clearly, right? Am I seeing clearly? Is it clear to me how important my own perception colors what it is that I experience? And no one better than Rabbi Alan Lew, alav shalom, of blessed memory, who wrote on this parsha in his book, This Is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared, brings such a wonderful story about himself and his son on a mountain during the middle of a storm, when they hid away the storm began and they hid away and they sought shelter in a little structure on the mountain. And you can look in there. It talks about how he was focusing on what was outside of that little structure, and his son was focusing on what was in the window. He was looking through the window, and his son was looking at the window. And that reminded him that the doors of perception and the very vehicle through which we perceive the world, and in this case, our vision, our re'eh, our seeing, is itself the place that needs to be clarified, right? To be interrogated and noticed, let's say. But then when we move from this into, I place before you today blessing and curse. And it's so wonderful because in Beth's reading here, you might notice, and you wouldn't notice maybe, but that the English translation here takes a liberty that is not available really in the Hebrew. So in the English, it says, right, blessing if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, and curse if you do not. Now this clause, right, this is not actually in the Hebrew, right? The clause if you, which is of course always a covenantal clause, right? It's a quid pro quo, right? If you keep the commandments, God says, it'll be great. If you don't, it won't be so great. But the conditional if is not available in the Hebrew. It's not there at all. It only is in the curse. In the blessing, it doesn't say if you keep the commandments, you'll be blessed. It says that you, right? That the blessing, that you will keep the blessing, right? It doesn't say it's a complete, it hits the reader and the commentators kind of very, very starkly as a non-symmetrical conditional statement. So let's look at the Hebrew, and I'll try to highlight this just so you get a sense of it in verse 27, okay? In the Hebrew, et habracha, the blessing, the blessing. It's a very strange grammatical way to begin a verse. Et habracha, it's the announcement, the blessing. Asher tishma'u, that you listen. Now, asher tishma'u can mean many things grammatically. It can mean if you will obey. But it's not the normal way that you would say it. It sounds almost determinative. Of course you're going to listen. You'll obey. Asher tishma'u. You're going to listen. You're going to obey el mitzvot, to the commandments of the Lord, right? To the mitzvot of Yah, that I am commanding you today, right? And then you notice the asymmetry here when you look at verse 28. Vehaklala im lo tishma'u. There it uses the normal Hebrew for the conditional. Im lo, if you will not. Listen, do you see this here? It's im, aleph mem. If, im, right? It doesn't exist here in the blessing. So the blessing seems to lack that contingency, that doubt, as it were. It's right. It kind of lays itself up for comment. You'll see when Rashi comes along in France and he says, "Wait a second, someone has to explain this strange locution. Can you see, everybody see this, the Rashi here? Right? Right, he has to add what is not in the text because it's clearly would bother someone reading. He says, anybody want to read? Can anybody see? Jay, do you want to read this?
The Rashi,
Yeah,
Et HaBracha,
yeah.
I set before you the blessing with the condition that you should obey.
So Rashi seems to need, of course, as I just said, he needs to add something that you would, when it comes to the curses in verse 28, you don't need Rashi there. He doesn't have any comment there. He feels the need here to elucidate a grammatical problem and adds these words that are, of course, not there. There's a condition, right? The blessings are conditional, right? They're not a given. They're conditioned on you listening to the mitzvah, obeying them. That seems to be the simple understanding of the text, that Rashi seems to kind of add a little flavor there because the grammatical form is weird. Now, this sets us up for some beautiful Torah from the Berditchever and from other Hasidic masters. And what's clear is that the Rebbes of, it's not just them, it exists earlier in the Midrashim, but in Chassidut, nothing is worse than doing something. It's not actually Chassidim, it's already in Pirkei Avot. In the ethics of the fathers, the intention behind doing a good deed, right, is already, it's already raised. It's already a problem for the rabbis of the Mishnaic period and the Talmudic period who want us to serve and to be good people or good Jews or whatever the category is for the right reasons, and not on, to see the Torah as a utility, like we'll do it for the sake of. Right? We should be doing things for their own reason, right? There seems to be in the rabbinic tradition a very important yearning for us to actually clarify our motivations and to not be, as the rabbis of the Mishnah say, like servants who are serving God in order to receive a reward. We should serve God out of love. That's kind of the very basic assertion of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, right? We should, we shouldn't be doing it like, why are you doing it? Because I want all kinds of goodies, right? Now, of course, the rabbis are very clearly counter-textual to the simple meaning of the Bible. If anybody looks at the way that the Bible is structured, it's structured very deeply on this notion of a quid pro quo between us and God. It's a kind of fealty covenantal model. And the rabbis move us in a different direction. And then the Hasidic masters, as you'll see now, they learn something very deep from this grammatical moment, right? In order to teach us a little bit about what they think it means to be a refined servant of God, as it were, Oved Hashem, one who is in the practice. I'm going to read this, the Kedushas Levi, and you can follow along in the English, okay? This is from the Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, and the great 18th century sage, Levi Yitzchak Berditchev. We can stop here for a moment, actually. If there's going to be a question, I'll stop for a second. Let's see, I thought I saw a hand just now. Is it Jay? Go ahead, Jay.
I'm sorry, this is just very simple-minded, but couldn't an explanation for the difference be simply that the blessings are sort of me'uvan me'elav? I mean, everybody knows that the blessing, that if you behave properly, the blessings will come. They don't have to be, I mean, the if is implied. It's like everybody knows it, so you don't have to say it, kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Muvan me'elav, that concept, yeah.
Like it's understood from itself. So, it's like the Leonard Cohen song, everybody knows. Everybody knows. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's the simplest answer. I mean, it's the problem. The simplest answer is that why do we think that it has to have, why does grammar has to, why must the text be symmetrical? Why does the text always have to follow the rules that we imagine that there's some, that the rules always are intact, or like the Torah is always, those are the simplest answers that Muvan Me'elav, meaning it's understood, is that everybody knows we're about to have a covenantal moment where Moshe says, I'm placing before you blessing and curse. Yeah. But even if that's the simplest answer, it doesn't stop Rashi and others from being bothered by what they perceive to be an intentional asymmetry between these two things, and therefore ripe for midrashic expansion and spiritual learning. So you're right. It could, of course, that could be an answer. There are a number of really excellent answers that are offered as well. So I don't know if that answered. I think that answered what you said. In other words, yes, you're right, but it still doesn't stop the midrashic mind that wants to make sense of it from making sense of it this way. So let's look at the Berdishra, because it might take us a little while to unpack it and see where he goes. But Joe St. George, okay, we need to get to the text. So everybody, I'm just going to invite Joe, go ahead, and then we're going to go to the text, okay?
Can you hear me?
Now we hear you, but you've got an echo. Okay.
You know the statement, no good deed goes unpunished. And I say that because we have to learn that our curses are our blessings too. And I think God wants us to see blessings differently. Because in Genesis 3:7, he cursed the ground for our sake. And so we should see blessings from a different context, not from this quid pro quo, but because whatever happens that God allows in our lives, we should always see them as a blessing.
So let's go there. Let's go there in a moment, okay? We're going to go there in a moment. That's exactly where another Hasidic master will take us as well. That's okay. So here we go. So follow along with me in the English if you'd like. I'm going to go over here on the Hebrew side. Oh yesh lomar. The Berdishra says I have a lot of different ways to explain re'eh. She'mefarshim diktaku ala lashon asher tishma'u. The mefarshim, the commentators, are troubled by the word asher tishma'u, that you will, right? That you will, right? That you will read, that you will obey, that you will obey. That's the blessing that you will obey. Instead of saying if you obey. Why? If you obey is not used, but that you obey. The blessing that you will obey seems to be odd. It should have said in the Bible, if you listen, and not that you will listen. The blessing that you will listen, he says that when it comes to the curses, it's conditional. If you do not listen, curses, right, will come if you do not listen to the mitzvot. So he says this. It's a known teaching, he says, that the rabbis offered in the Talmud in Tractate Kiddushin, this char mitzvah b'hai alma leka, that the rabbis asserted that there is really no reward in this world for the mitzvot that we do, meaning no spiritual reward. Right? The rabbis tried to undermine the kind of simple meaning of the text that says that we receive these earthly rewards if we are obedient. Right? The rabbis had a deep theological problem with that. Of course, it would seem that on prima facie, just like looking at the world, it's like hard to argue that actually works, right? So the rabbis were like, it doesn't always work that way, right? We see all kinds of good people who are doing all kinds of wonderful things for whom it doesn't really work out. So the rabbis asserted, no, there's no reward for mitzvot in this world, which is a pretty amazing statement. But then the rabbi said, Aval yesh schar echad, says the Berdishra, there is one reward, she'adam mekabel, even in this world, af b'zeh ha'olam. Even in this world, there is a reward for doing a mitzvah, right? That actually runs around the rabbinic, declaration that there are no rewards. And what is that reward? Schar mitzvah mitzvah. The rabbis in the ethics of our ancestors, in their pithy little aphorisms for how to lead the good life, say that the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. Right? So what does that mean? What is the reward for a mitzvah as a mitzvah? In the simple meaning of that aphorism as it appears in our tradition, it's that the reward for doing a mitzvah is that you begin to ingrain and entrain in yourself to do more and more good deeds, and then one good deed leads to another, right? One good deed leads to another. But there's a way to read that text that the reward of a mitzvah is not another mitzvah, but the mitzvah you've just performed, right? Not the reward of the mitzvah is another mitzvah, but the reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. Schar mitzvah mitzvah. And as the great singer that my kids listen to all over, it's all day long, ve'ein ladavar kitzvah, and there's no end to it. There's the reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah, and there's no depth. It keeps going and going. It goes on and on and on. Ve'hu mitzvah gufa she'asa te'ein tzarich yoser schar, and that's the mitzvah itself is the reward. You don't need more reward. Rak zeh gufa shezochel asos mitzvah ve'asa tanug. It's like the opportunity to do this thing, to be so blessed, to be able to engage in a mitzvah, it gives such pleasure, as it were, to the Creator. He says, and there's no greater reward than that. And he said that's the way we should understand the verse from this morning's reading. This is the meaning of the verse. Moshe says, look deeply and clearly, I am placing before you today a blessing, which the Berditcher says, says, I'm saying to, the Berditcher says, the Moshe is saying, even when you're alive, I'm going to tell you how the inner sauce, the secret to receiving reward in this world. That when you do these blessings, like when you are involved in building of the world, that has its own intrinsic reward. It's not a means towards an end, but it's an end. It's almost as if the Berditcher is saying, I refuse to allow mitzvot to become instruments, right? They are both the path to and the place that you arrive at. It's the joy of the mitzvah, the joy of doing a mitzvah is itself the mitzvah. Umefaresh mahu habracha. He says, the meaning of the verse is not if you, the blessing will come if you obey. The blessing is that you obey. When you are obeying, that's the blessing. Meaning when you are aligned, when you are in service, that is the blessing. It's not like the dessert after the meal. It's the meal itself. Says, listen to me, that's what I want you to know. That itself will become the blessing. Says that there's nothing greater, there is no greater reward than the reward that comes from being involved in mitzvot. This first foray into a Hasidic master this morning, trying to, in some way, right, it's a completely different understanding of obedience. I think that people are kind of hard to teach and also read all these beautiful marginalia, but let me try. The serving the Holy One is a privilege that gives joy to the soul and perhaps to the world. Yes, perfectly said, Margot, beautifully said. And I think I saw earlier, and Joni said something that I also loved. Where was it? We should be doing the right thing because it's the right thing. That alone is the reward. Of course, Aunt Joni was already in the Berditcher's mind. That's exactly what the Berditcher says. And so the sense that somehow the Berditcher is inviting a kind of, this is the kind of chop wood, carry water, be present with whatever you're doing. And I think that we might expand this to say that in one way, we could limit the Berditchever's teaching to only those religious categories of things that we consider to be mitzvot. But you could also invert it and say that anytime you are fully present to what it is that you're fully doing, and staying present with it in the sense of looking clearly, here's a blessing, here's an opportunity to be fully embodying what it is to build a better world, that becomes its own reward too. And that one, right, to the extent that we live now in a culture where everything that everyone does is performative, where everyone catalogs each and every moment of their lives only by virtue of how many people see it and how many likes they get, and all of the signaling of how wonderful I am and so on, right? Which is, again, I'm not. There are plenty of reasons to do good things, and it's not always the case that everybody and all of us are always in this mode. But to some extent, the Berditchever is saying to his students and all of his Hasidim and all of the people around his table, right? If you're truly involved in the mitzvah, there's no greater reward than that. And so, if no one sees it, the Holy One still sees it. And if nobody, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, if one does a mitzvah and the whole world doesn't know about it, is it still a mitzvah? And he would say, of course it is. Maybe it has a certain purity to it. I was sitting with a friend last night, and we were just saying this too, which was remarkable because we had gathered earlier in the week to sit at a shiva together for someone who had lost a very tragic event, and this person was the one supporting the family, and she was completely, this rock star. She had done everything imaginable to support the family. She works for one of the mourners, and then she had her own tragedy take place. I mean, not tragedy. I shouldn't say tragedy. She had her own hardship take place. Like, she. There was a flood in her house, and there was her washer and dryer broke down. It was like a whole nightmare. Like literally, the day that she was holding all of the family, and she was just completely overwhelmed, and she hadn't told anybody. And at the end of davening Ma'ariv, we finished the evening service. She broke down crying, and I went in to speak with her, and she told me, and I what happened. And I went over to my friend, and he said, "Oh my God, we have an extra washer and dryer, like in somewhere, and we're going to go get it." And and what ensued was literally he and his wife spent the entire day trying to organize a way to get to do this service, and when I saw him again yesterday, he said it was so remarkably filling to him to be in this mode of mitzvah. And he looked at me and he said, it's nothing better than doing a mitzvah. Nothing better than doing a mitzvah. Even if no one ever knows about it, even if the person we never give, the person didn't know that we did it for them, or we're doing it for the sake of the beauty of it. It's kind of an alignment because it's the right thing to do. And it really changes to many elements of the way that we imagine mitzvah. And this, of course, is completely in alignment. And I'm going to open it up for some hands and some comments. And there was another beautiful Torah from the Berditchever, from the Me'ashiloch, the Ishbitzer, that I wanted to end with in a couple of minutes. But it completely is in accordance with the way that the Hasidim think about mitzvah, not as commandment, but as connection opportunity, right? They always say the word mitzvah comes from the word connection in Aramaic, tzavta. So they always say, oh, here's a connection opportunity. There's a chance to be connected to our bodhicitta, maybe, is the way that Pema Shodron and the friends over at Shambhala would say that place in the heart that is good, the place in the heart that is connected to all, and that mitzvah builds those connected threads and reminds us of our deep mission here in the world. Right? Every mitzvah is an opportunity to be reminded of our mission statement. It's not the profit motive, right? The profit motive is like, I can't wait to see what I'm going to get when I finish my annual my annual mitzvah statement, right? I get to see, like, how many, what do my stocks look like in heaven or here on earth, let's say. But to do it because it's true, and in that moment also we get to feel that, this is why I'm here, is to do this. So I'm going to stop and the share, and and see if there are any hands, comments. I see there's a lot of chatting going on, but I'd love to hear your voices. It's been 4.5, 5 weeks. So go ahead, Jill. Mindful that I want to actually stop in. We're going to take about 5 minutes of comments, so just be mindful as well. Thank you. Go ahead, Jill.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. It's great to see everyone. I'm doing the adult equivalent to popping air bubbles. I'm wearing a hotel bathrobe, so it's very luxurious. So anyway, I wanted to just say that, yeah, I think it's mitzvot are basically a complete circuit within themselves. And I don't know if you all have experienced this, but I'll give you a really, really small example of something that just happened. So my niece and nephew got married during COVID, just their immediate families. And now we're having reception in my new niece's town. And I gave them a blessing and they loved it. And it was very hard to give them or to ask for a blessing for them without crying if I looked at my nephew. So I just looked up. They loved it. And then I remembered that I have a good friend who's a calligrapher who's putting some of my poetry into calligraphy for someone else. And when I told them, I was like, well, maybe for your wedding gift, I can put this in your, the blessing I gave in calligraphy. But I qualified it by saying, don't worry, like the person's already doing it for someone else. It won't be any trouble. It's only 2 or 3 sentences. It's nothing, and because the way that they're so gracious. They don't want other people going to any trouble for them. And in kind of diminishing the mitzvah, so to speak, it felt more grand, if that makes sense, in a complete way. So I just feel like when we, when I'm just echoing what David said, is that when we give, it's kind of a complete circuit, and we almost we want to diminish it because the circuit is already complete, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. All right, wonderful. Eden, go ahead.
Hi, thank you.
Hey.
Hi. So I feel like the Berdichever is sort of solving this theological problem of the conditional if, that we don't necessarily actually experience the world that way. Like you keep mitzvot and you have blessing, that doesn't necessarily happen. And so the idea that the obedience itself is the blessing, like Joe said in the chat, and the alignment from doing that, it also feels to me that if there's ever a true expression of reward for mitzvah in this world, that it actually also comes from that. Like it also comes from this formulation where I've only ever felt that kind of synchronicity when I'm in relationship with divinity in that way, and when I am aligned. Like taking away the awareness of the if is also like the only way that maybe the if actually becomes true, is how I'm experiencing that also.
I love that, because it feels as though it's almost like when it's not different than the way that we experience ourselves in other relationships. Right. Like it's pretty clear to me that when I tell my wife, like listen, there's certainly I don't know, the biggest blessing of the last year, almost a year and a half now, in our family was the discovery of Modern Family. That show has saved us. We're about 10 years popular culture wise off the pace, but we laugh so deeply when we watch that show, the whole family, even Or, who has no idea what's going on. But on many of the episodes, I see like Phil, mocking himself, how he does things in order to have, it's like he does a good deed for Claire, his wife, and he puts it as a kind of in the bank. He says, it'll pay dividends. I've just done a couple of things, in 5 years, she'll let me do this or that. It's kind of this funny this funny riff. But in most relationships, it doesn't work that way, right? At some point, I'm not cleaning the dishes because if I clean the dishes, there's a deeper structure that I actually see the inherent value in the activity that we're engaging in. And certainly in religious life in Judaism, there are certainly many mitzvot where there's a clear intrinsic good that is present that makes it easier for us to engage it. Like it's not like, the example I gave of buying somebody or, a washer and dryer or giving the washer dryer has its kind of own inner intelligence. We're like, oh, I'm really helping someone. And I do benefits to some degree from the joy I get from helping somebody. Right. And I see human flourishing happening, but with other things, putting on tefillin, like, okay, what, exactly. But I think that you're right. Like if we turn almost all of these things into the ways that we are in service, right? All of the ways, like when I was setting the table last night for Shabbat, all this farm, they say like when you're setting the table for Shabbat, it's one of the holiest things you do all week. So if I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I'm definitely going to get a big reward in heaven. That doesn't work for me. That's not relational. And if I'm thinking, oh, I wish I was preparing my sermon, then I wouldn't be present either. And it's like, oh, this is setting the table for the Shekhinah. It's like, this is it. This is what our tradition says is the most beautiful, you're walking in Central Park, you're smiling. Those are mitzvot. You're out with people. You're fully present. And schar mitzvah, right? The beauty of a mitzvah is that you are connected. So thank you for that beautiful insight. Marilyn and Amy, if you could each take a minute, and then I'm going to finish with this Ishbitzer. So that's going to take us to the end. So take 1 minute, please, each.
Yes.
Hi, Marilyn, go ahead. We hear you.
Hi, great to see you. So I was just
thinking,
I was just thinking that it's not like there's two choices. That let's see, if I choose the blessing, then this will happen. It's like every single thing you do, it's only one choice, and it will go, you do it, and if you don't do it, this is what's going to happen. So that every action is a blessing or a curse. It's not like when
there
I do this.
Certain actions right there. Here's the blessed action, and here's I see. So you're actually commenting on. You're actually offering a new comment on the problem of the language. Like Raditchever had his comment, which is right. This is all about like the intentionality behind our actions, and that's why he hung his hat, as it were, on that beautiful, confusing language, saying no, it's the language is actually perfect. The blessing is when you do, right? That's the blessing itself is the doing, right? And you're saying, no, here's another interpretation. Like there's only one action ever, and it's either leads you in this direction or in that direction. Am I getting that right?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. I'm gonna pick up on that in 30 seconds. Amy, go ahead.
Good morning.
Morning.
Am I on? Okay.
You're on.
I wasn't with you last week because I went to a party and I really had a lot of internal turmoil about going to this party because I knew that we had sold 500 tickets and only about 100 showed up. But at any rate, I have been for the past 3 years fighting to get lead out of school drinking water. And I don't have any kids in school, but I realize it's important for our next generation to get the lead out of school drinking water. So last weekend, I was able to talk to 2 gubernatorial candidates, a U.S. Senate candidate, a U.S. Congress candidate, and the mayor and school board members and all kinds of people to be able to talk to them about this issue. And I guess the blessing I have is that a week later, I don't have any COVID symptoms. So I'm counting that as my rewarding blessing, is that I didn't get COVID by being in this big group of people and doing this mitzvah.
Okay. That actually, first of all, it's an amazing story. Second, because you did a good mitzvah. Second of all, it is actually, it has many parts to it. Like on the one hand, you're saying that you did what you did because it was the right thing to do, irrespective of potential harm, and that's also wonderfully inspirational. It's also, you're actually also saying though that there there can be a reward for doing a mitzvah because you have protection, which is a different conversation. But certainly be careful in Florida with your crazy governor, unbelievable. And we're not going to go there right now. We're going to go to the last text. Thank you and welcome back, Amy. This last text, if you can see it, can you see it? Yeah. Right there? Yeah? Yeah, do you see it in the purple or no? Barbara, I'm not sure if you can see it. Okay, it's not translated, so I'm going to go slowly. And it's from the Ishbitzer Rebbe, and I'm going to leave you all with this before we go into, I'm going to leave you guys to schmooze a little bit. Maybe you'll talk about this or something else as I go inside to prepare for this morning's prayer service. The Ishbitzer was a radical Hasidic Rebbe who lived in the 19th century. Some of you have studied him before. His name was the Mordechai Yosef Lainer, L-I-A-I-N-E-R, and you can look him up. He wrote this one book called The Waters of Shiloh, and he was a very, very deep thinker. Some say that he was a thinker who believed in determinism, and there's something to be said for that. He kind of limited free will. That was his biggest claim to fame. As my son Bear loves to say in some movie, I think it was Happy Feet 2, something like when the krill are talking to each other, and he says, "There's nothing in this world is free will," because one of the krill is is named Will. So he says, "Oh, there's no such thing as free will." So the Ishbitzer would probably agree with that to some extent, but he did also believe that human beings have a small smidgen of agency. And it's in that small smidgen of agency where a person will, as it were, choose blessing and choose what is wholesome and hopefully be motivated by the gravitational pull of goodness that is within those actions that pull us and magnetize us. But he harps on the beginning of the parsha where it says, "I place before you blessing and curse." He doesn't understand why blessing and curse are conjoined in Moses's opening sentence. Why put them together? Why not say, "Today I place before you blessing, and I'll also place before you curse," right? He doesn't like that they're together. There are such neighbors in the verse. So listen to what he says and how it relates to what we've been discussing, and then we'll close. Okay, Hainu. B'chol makom shekadosh baruch hu yanchil tov al adam. This goes back to what Joe was saying earlier today. I don't know if Joe's still with us, but I hope she is. In every place where God gives you an inheritance of goodness, where God bestows goodness to human beings, often it will come in the garb that appears to the eye the opposite of the bestowal of goodness. Sometimes things will look exactly the opposite of what it is intended to look like. In order that in order that human beings, through their activities and through their agency, will separate out and take the light, that will do a little bit of work to do a deep dive into what's the hidden blessing, the deep hidden blessing. And through that action, it will be called not God's bestowal of goodness, but your bestowal of goodness. He says that our work in the world is to the best of our ability to transform, right? Take a sad song and make it better, right? To make a sad song and make it better. That's Hey Jew. Right? That's what he's saying. Hey, Jew,